Chief, could you hold on? You guys hold on.
Make a motion to come out of executive session. Second.
I have a motion by Lang, second by Barker to come out of executive session. Councilman Lang, you do a roll call. Yes. Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Councilwoman Hottinger.
Yes.
Councilman Hauser.
Albert.
Yes, I'm sorry.
And Councilman Marshall, yeah.
We're still in here.
Just to make everybody aware, we discussed some things with the IAFF contract. It was just some internal things that we wanted to clarify. Anything in the executive session cannot be discussed outside of executive session. No decisions were made. And there was nothing that was determined as far as any action or anything. It was just a discussion. So that's what executive session is for. And if there were any decisions to be made, we'd have to come out of executive session in order to make any kind of a decision. So with that, this finance committee meeting stands adjourned. Next up, I believe, is service.
All right, let's always be time. I'll call the service committee meeting to order. Those present, myself, Brad, Harris, Barker, Klein, and Hottinger. Up first, we'll consider resolution 23-01. ODOT final resolution. The project consists of constructing a 2-lane roundabout intersecting Thornwood Crossing, Thornwood Drive, River Road, and Reddington Road, including roadway realignment, driveways, guardrail, bench, drainage, water, main work, lighting, signage, pavement, markings, traffic signals, landscaping, building demolition, and a structure lying within the city of Newark.
Woo-hoo. Everything.
I'm excited about it.
This is the final piece of legislation, the final resolution from ODOT to move forward with the Thornwood Crossing Bridge and Roadway project. So this is the last piece that they need to put the project out to bid. Plan is that the project will be out to bid in February, with bids opening in March. And we would anticipate construction starting probably early summer. So any other questions? I'll be glad to try to answer them on this.
This is a piece of legislation involving ODOT, but it does not have yet expedited or emergency clause. Is that accurate?
That is correct. They do not need it back until February 24th, so they're quite early this time. So we should be in no need for those emergency clauses.
Wasn't verify that. Any questions? Motion by Harris.
Second.
Seconded by Parker. The questions from the committee,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Moorhead, I just want to confirm in this legislation, it shows the city's cost is $131,578.95 at this time. Correct?
That is correct. There is, that is our share of some of the municipal bridge funding that is on the project. We also have a SID loan that's available for use on the project. And that will get matched up with some of the ODOT track money that's also been approved on the project. So in the end, we won't know whether that SID loan is needed or not until the bids are opened in March.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing this on to council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion passes with a vote of 5-0. Not give anybody a chance to say no. Up next, resolution number 23-02, a resolution authorizing and directing the director of public service to advertise for bids and enter into contract for certain essential supplies for various departments of the city of Newark, Ohio for 2023.
Yes, this is our annual piece of legislation that we submit for chemicals for the water and wastewater plant, our street maintenance materials, and any other items that we would receive an annual bid for or any other departments. We've done traffic control items in the past. I don't think we've got anything this year for those, so it's basically for the chemicals and street maintenance material.
You find street maintenance materials.
Asphalt, we take annual bid prices for supplying asphalt for the street department for asphalt patching. The cold mix materials and the emulsion materials that you use in the dirt patch.
Any other questions? Somebody down here had a question?
I made a motion.
No. Sorry.
Second.
Seconded by Parker. Question for you when we get done. No run off this morning. Any other questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing this on the council vote, signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. It will pass 5-0. This could be a personal request that come in from several citizens. And with this legislation that we just passed about the roundabout. The traffic light at Cherry Valley and Runningson Road. Is there any way that we can turn that into a flashing red? Turn it into a four-way stop, even though one of those ways is not being utilized at all.
You mean for the next couple of months until we get the temporary bridge in?
Yeah.
I don't know, I'd have to investigate that.
Would please. Thank you. No other issues. Service committee is adjourned. Up next will be safety committee.
All right, I'll call the safety committee to order. Present are members, myself, Mr. Barker, Klein, Mr. Hauser, and Mr. Rath. Tonight we'll be discussing ordinance number 23-01, an ordinance amending portions of chapter 830 of the codified ordinances of the city of Newark, Ohio, regarding licensing requirements for electronic gaming parlors operated within the city of Newark, Ohio. Director Hickman and more as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. What we're presenting tonight is some, for your consideration, is some proposed changes to the city ordinance regarding electronic gaming parlors, skilled games, if you will. There's been a significant increase of those businesses over the last couple of years, and with that increase has become an increased demand for services from our emergency services, the police and fire. So with Director Moore's help here, we kind of started digging into this, and what we found is that in order for a skilled game parlor to be in existence, they have to be licensed through the state of Ohio. And currently we're not requiring that right now. So we want to address that. Basically, we want all these businesses to operate within the Ohio Revised Code. We've met with members of the Ohio Investigative Unit and also the Casino Control Commission, who oversees all this. We got their recommendations on how we should proceed, and this is kind of what that they've the direction that they've pushed us to go. So what we're looking to change is basically, number one, before a business could even apply for a license in the city of Newark, they have to be approved in the state of Ohio. Secondly, we've changed the billing, the fee cycle from a semi-annual to an annual fee. What we found is that doing it biannually was just putting too much strain on our property maintenance department, because every 6 months they were going out to re-inspect these places. And that's also would bring us into alignment with what we're doing with the marijuana dispensaries. They apply once a year. They have to meet state standards. It would bring those two really in alignment with one another. we're clarifying some issues on when a license can be revocated and also clarifying grounds for when a license can be refused to be issued. Basically, the bottom line is we're just asking them to follow the ORC. And what do we get from this? We talked with, like I said, we talked with the state, and right now we could have some problems with investigations and prosecutions without doing this. So the state kind of looked at us and said, well, you guys are licensing them, so we kind of want to keep our hands off of it. So by doing this, by making them go through the state process, we can bring in state resources, if you will, to help investigate and prosecute cases of violations in these businesses. Am I leaving anything
No,
out?
you're exactly right. And we're hoping by making these businesses become legally operating businesses, it will also reduce the calls for service that we've been having to these locations. EMTs,
What kind of calls are you getting?
calls to the police department, calls to the fire department. They've become kind of a hotbed of some activity that we're trying to discourage here in the city.
Are there any other questions, Mr. Barker?
Thank you, sure. So I totally agree with this. What does the timeline look like? So there's already some establishments here in town. What is their time frame to come in compliance with this? They would pass it, it goes through council. What's that time frame?
And obviously that's hard because, like you said, there's a lot of establishments operating that are not licensed by the state of Ohio and the city. Show us that you're working on it. You know, this, obviously this year jumping into it, they're starting out not being legal at this point. Get the process started. We can confirm that process has been started. And it seems to be a pretty quick turnaround on the licensing issue. And you know, you have to get that to get our license. And if you don't, then you're going to be operating illegally, not only in the state now, but also the city.
That was a question that we asked from the community, the casino commission, is what is the application process? And they described it as you can do it online. There are 9 questions. And if someone cooperates, they can get approved or denied within a day. So it's not a huge hurdle that people are being asked to overcome.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions. I know one of the ways you're getting around this is called skill games. So they're not gambling. But do we have concerns now that we have legalized betting in the state of Ohio? That some of these skill game places can be gambling establishments?
Well, they are all subject to inspection, not only by the state, but also the city. And so we're in contact with these agencies. If we have any concern, we can contact them and they can inform us of the steps to take.
So if they're operating as a betting location, then you have to be licensed by the state of Ohio.
I'm assuming if they're trying to operate a gambling site,
Yes.
any of that's going to be regulated by the state. Absolutely, 100%.
Is that something we want to also consider putting this additional licensure out?
Well,
Like the marijuana is highly regulated by the state, we still require newer license.
the only gaming parlors that I'm aware of, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, are these skilled game parlors, which is under a distinct license by the casino commission. So if these parlors are opening up within our city, they now need to go through the state. If we can find out who's licensed and who's not. And if there's anybody who's not licensed, we now have a remedy for that, as well as calling the state.
And then my other question is, I know we have the ability to recommend relocation of liquor licenses based on criminal activity, frequent flyer, that stuff. You see us operate, being able to do that now, or in the future, rather, if this passes,
Yes.
with the scoping facilities.
I think that's one of the reasons that we're presenting this, because it clarifies that by statute, correct me if I'm wrong here, I have the safety director has the authority to issue and revoke licenses. Under what circumstances, it's a little bit murky under the current ordinance. I'm sorry.
Or he is too.
Not in this case. Because the only reason he could revoke a license is if someone had been found guilty of violating the law. Not that they were violating the law, but they had been found to have violated the law. So what we've changed is that we can revoke and refuse based on the fact that you're not in compliance with state law as well. If you're violating the laws of the city, Newark, et cetera.
Which is basically what the state does through the application process. They do a background check if there's criminal violations, those are kind of automatic disqualifiers. So in one regards, they're kind of doing background checks for us. And once we started digging into this, there are so many moving pieces to it. What I learned is there's a whole lot I don't know about skilled games. And there's 3 different levels. There's A, B, and C. All of the ones that we have here are basically what they consider a C level. There's strict limits on prizes that they can give out and what they can't give out. They can't give any cash prizes. If it's a cash prize, then it's automatically considered a slot machine, and that's a gambling violation. So we would strongly urge your consent on this change in the ordinance.
Yeah, are there, just like there are limits on liquor license issued, are there gonna be limits on these licenses issued in our city? Because they look like they're strict.
They are. The trick for, I think what's gonna be is making sure that they get licensed by the state. You know, we don't have a limit per se on how many a person can have in the city. But as long as they're being run legally, that's where we're starting. That's what we want. We want compliance with the law.
Would it be something we could consider?
Down the road, if that becomes an issue.
Yes.
We can always
Thank
do
you.
that.
And I'm wondering, also, would they be able to have dual licensing with liquor within the same establishment?
Within the skilled games, alcohol is not permitted. That's specific within the legislation.
Also, lastly, there's some cities require that since these do tend to addictive tendencies, that they pay into counseling or available counseling for those that participate or find themselves addicted, and to where they experience loss of job or some significant loss. So I'm wondering, will that be required too, that they pay into the city's how would I say, rehab system for gambling addiction?
That is not required at this time. I don't even know that we have.
I don't know of anything like that currently exists. Any fees are collected go into the general fund.
Okay.
We have a motion from Mr. Rath. Second from Mr. Barker.
I had one follow-up, Mark, and we're running on time, but can I ask my question? I'm just curious in terms of how is this meant? You meant it was gonna reduce crime and calls, facing patients. How exactly is it gonna achieve that? I mean, just curious what specifically is gonna accomplish that.
When people are not required to follow the law, but be in compliance with city law, that tends to lead to very undisciplined, in my opinion,
Okay,
way of running things.
okay.
So we were technically licensing illegal businesses in the city. So they're running illegally. What else is going on in that business?
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so that if we can make everybody get in line with the state, hopefully that will reduce. You hope.
Yeah.
I've got a first motion from Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Barker. Seeing no other questions, all those in favor of sending this before full council by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That if you will adjourn, then next will be capital and food.
Okay, thank you. I understand.
Councilman, is Councilman, I'm gonna be there. Good. Sorry. Okay, I'm gonna call the Capital Improvements Committee to order. President Tottinger, Rath, Marmy, Labutus, and Harris. There's an item to consider, which has a couple different parts. It is to consider resolution number 2303 expedited, which is a resolution appropriating and disappropriating monies for the current expense appropriation. This is dealing with streets and paving. So I believe Councilman. Yeah.
Hauser?
Hauser, thank you. Councilman Hauser. Progress to a request.
It's the beard.
It is, you look so much older than I used to.
Thank you, Chairwoman and members of the committee. This is something I wanted to bring to the committee. Over the past year or so, I've had a variety of different residents approach me and make comments that the city doesn't seem to have any priority around paving alleys in the city of Newark. I understand the policy at this point has been we should put 100% of the priority, 100% of the effort into paving, high traffic, just actual streets that people travel on more frequently. And I can understand that. But I don't think that necessarily should mean that as an administration, as a city, we should not make any effort to pave alleys. Residences all over the place, and especially areas that I represent in the first ward in East and South Newark, have large portions of alleys. And many of these, they use them to access their driveway or garage on a frequent basis. And I think this lends itself to some justification that the city should make some effort to maintain these alleys. I know that we patch and do gravel and chip and seal alleys, but these are in a sense temporary fixes. In many cases, a lot of the alleys, even with these fixes, are in pretty bad disrepair. So I think doing a little bit more of a permanent fix in terms of making some effort to pave alleys in the city makes a lot of sense. Specifically, I got some numbers from Director Moorhead on this, and assuming a 12-foot wide alley, and some alleys in East Newark and South Newark are 8-foot wide, but it's assuming a 12-foot wide alley, doing basic 1.5 inch resurfacing would allow about 1.55 miles of paving for alleys. And doing deeper reconstruction of about 3 to 4 inches of paving would be 0.625 miles. So I just wanted to share some of that with you. In terms of how these would get paved and what priority would be placed in certain alleys, I don't have a specific answer on that. I think that would be probably up to the engineer's office to do some sort of prioritization, looking at what higher traffic alleys and what ones are in most disrepair. And this has not been done yet. So the Director Moorhead has not made any effort on this at this point, obviously, as we don't pave alleys currently. And that's it. Just available for any questions.
Questions from the committee? Councilman Harris.
Service Director, how do you feel about, and the mayor, about paving alleys?
Well, I did pave one last year. We did have an alley that was just very poor shape, so we did pave one last year. Over the years prior, we've gravelled some, we've tried chip and seal. I'm not a big fan of gravel and chip and seal, but more of a fan of the a hard surface, some kind of hard surface. There's things that we can look into, variation of paving.
So we're not talking about 10 or 12 alleys a year, or just maybe 1 or 2 here and there. Is that what we're thinking?
That's Jeff, that's what we've been doing.
Okay.
Just a minute, administration, I believe you asked a question. Just administration favor.
Yeah.
Myself?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I agree with David. We do a couple a year, and sometimes we reach out. Some alleys are used every day by people, and some aren't used at all. And it's obviously we have a network of more alleys than newer cities across the state, I'd say. So some of them can become very pertinent in many ways, but it'll be a big responsibility. I mean, you're gonna have to pick and choose which alleys and where and who. I mean, everybody loves their alley paved. So I'm just being, the logistics of it's what I always look into, the implementation, the logistics of it. Where the money is now can be used for alley paving. There's nothing against that. And I certainly think we do this internally a lot of times. Buster and his team do them with the machines we have, and we'll go out and do that. And I tend to think we always want to keep our primary streets primary. And that when we're trying to get ahead of this, if it's say a 10-year life on a main street, you got to get paving it within 10 or 12 years, or it starts to really fall apart that costs exponential dollars. And then so you're losing anything you got ahead. So we have to be very careful about. As you know, the gasoline excise tax was raised, and it gave us 10.5 cents a gallon more, but then it turned around, consumption went way down with COVID, so that kind of gave us a, we thought that could have been effects, and it wasn't much, so, I guess I'm not a big fan of earmarking monies, leaving it more generally open for what you'd like to use it for, and I think that'd be something, if someone reached out and said, I'd like an alley paved, we'd go look at it and have a discussion with that, whether it's through a council member or however like. I will know that money, and it's not right on point with this, but several years ago, Mansfield earmarked some money for paving and didn't include intersection improvements, and they turned around and couldn't use that money because they didn't have any money for intersection. So you gotta be careful when you earmark money, is all I'm saying. So the intent of paving alleys, though, is well understood and understand that a little bit. But then we are taking one away for street manager, so.
Yeah, this will go out to Mr. Rhodes or Mr. Moorhead, whoever getting into it, but if we have our own street crews using our own equipment, is that the most efficient, cost effective, let's say one, is that the most cost effective way for us to take care of alleys? Knowing how much we might have to pay to bid on them versus how much we might have to pay to have our own crews do them. And then two, is that a long-term? Is that as effective long-term? In a very strange way, I'm asking, do they do their job as a contractor?
I'll take a stab at that, and Brian can always correct me if I'm wrong. The alley we paved last year, Mr. Princeton's crews did for it. But you also have to understand, while that's a good remedy, that they do an awful lot of stormwater work and storm basin work and things of that nature too. So if the weather cooperates and we get caught up on some of the other things like the grass cutting and stormwater work, then it's a nice option to have a few bucks to pay. And in the past, the street department paved streets like 33rd Street. They paved Jonathan Lane in 2004. After it was chipped and sealed. And so we do have the skill set to do some paving. Just comes down to the man hours that we have to have.
Can you address the difference in cost between our guys doing it and contractor now?
Well, it's just the cost of the asphalt and then of course the labor that we pay. So you'd have to put a pencil there to give you an exact.
I don't mean exactly the ballpark. Is it cheaper for us to do it or cheaper to have a contractor?
Generally, since we have the labor and equipment, it would be cheaper for us to do it, depending on what we pay for bulk asphalt. Sometimes when they did these paving programs, they get pretty close to or somewhat close to the price of your paying asphalt. Just depends on the year.
Fair enough.
Other questions from committee members? Oh. Okay, sir.
Hi,
Name and address, please.
Yeah. Rochelle Boland's been 237 Violet Court. I'd like to mention that for a lot of our city, the alleyways are very important. That's for a lot of the older homes, that's the only access people have to their garages and other things, and it's just really important. One mistake that I think the city has been done, which I think is actually costing them more, because it degrades the systems and shortens the lifetime of the alleys, is that there's stormwater systems that are often blocked when they do the repairs, that they keep on blocking that a lot of the storm access, which degrades the alleys, and a lot of water accumulates and destroys the work that they did within short work. And I think that needs to be addressed. So I think that needs to be kept in mind. They need to understand how these structures were designed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Murray.
Yeah. I just feel that with the number of miles that we have in alleyways, we do have quite a few. To earmark it as paving versus possibly a more cost-effective manner in order to repair and make our alleyways better. I just feel like we should do whatever we can to do the best for all areas of the city and also the most that we can do, because I know that a number of the alleyways, like Ms. Ball-Smith has indicated, they're utilized on a daily basis, whether it's to get to a garage or whether it's to get from one part of downtown to another. You know, especially here in the downtown area, a lot of the alleyways are traveled more than even the residential type alleyways. So I just feel like that's a decision that needs to be made with the administration, with the engineer's office, and I don't think they need a separate program with alleyways for paving that could end up reducing the amount that we could utilize across the city. I have the same concern as the mayor as far as earmarking dollars too much. In the fact that, you know, then we can't utilize it for maintenance if we needed to maintain alleyways and had some huge problems with alleys. And we spend it all on paving, you know, a mile and a half worth of alleys, and then we don't have enough to do more. So that's kind of my opinion on it.
Thank you. Just a comment before we go further. My opinion is that although I agree with what you're saying completely, I think sometimes if you don't allocate money, then it gets spent, just like in everyday budgets, right? You're gonna spend something on something, but something comes up and you spend it on something else, and then, okay, we're gonna push back that paving for the alley again to the next year, and then push it to the next year. I don't think $100,000 it's not gonna get us much anyway, but at least it gets something. So I don't feel like that would take away a majority from our street paving, just my personal opinion. So I just want to say that. And then we're getting close to council time. So is there a motion?
I'll
Any
make a
other
motion.
comments or something?
So what, can it be earmarked for just alleys then instead of paving of alleys?
What was your intention?
Yeah, and my intention was, I know that I guess I might follow up with another question in terms of when you say alleys, do you mean patching? I guess I'd be curious, what we patch them now, I'd be curious what.
Well, there's other solutions, and I've given the service director some ideas that the private sector has done as far as roadways and what I've seen that are not paving, and it's for less traveled roads. And it has somewhat of an asphalt content to it, but it is not a pavement. So that's just my fear is that we're gonna spend a lot of money on paving when we could have put a good surface on a lot more alleyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I would just push forward that is as presented, I wanted to do paving, that's what I would say on that. I appreciate it.
So request stands as is for, it would be. Your motion would be to unappropriate or disappropriate $100,000 out of maintenance of streets and appropriate $100,000 to alley paving. That's right.
Correct.
Okay, I have a motion by Harris. Second by Labutus. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
So I have 2 opposed and 3 yeses. It does pass. Capital improvements now stands adjourned. Thank you.
You got me. Gotta take care of it.